There we go. All right. So, again, welcome everyone. It's so nice to have so many of you here with us tonight. This is a candid conversation about systemic racism and whatever else comes up between the four of us. And I welcome all attendees to put in the chat where you're zooming in from. If you're watching on Facebook, please feel free to let us know where you're Facebooking in from. And I'll introduce myself first. My name is Misha Safran. And it was really important for me to start these webinars. I don't know if it's called a public apology or an amends. There were many years where I wasn't very active, and I don't need to get into all the reasons why I wasn't very active, but I wasn't. And I've made a pact with myself and my community and my partner to be an anti-racist activist, which means I need to confront and identify and have sustainable action around my racism. And so this webinar was created for that reason with the love and collaboration and cooperation with my partner, Jodi Lewis. And Jodi, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Jodi Lewis. I am the legal director at the Women's Resource Center. We provide services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And I run the Justice Center, which we primarily do family law work. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Misha started it and brought me in, and I'm really fortunate that she did. It's been wonderful to hear from our different panelists as they've come in and to hear about their experiences and share the space with them.
Thank you. Thank you. And I guess I forgot to mention I've been a teacher for over 30 years. I have my own business, but I don't really talk about my business on these because this is not about my business. So, I just want to take a moment. I'm going to share my screen so we can. Whoops, I have to get the right screen. Hold on a second. I just want to do a formal introduction of our guests. And I'm still learning after a full year of doing all this how to do it accurately. So here we go again. We're going to do a formal introduction of our panelists. So again, this is a candid conversation about systemic racism featuring Brenda Johnson and Amber. Oh, Amber, I wanted to ask, is it viola or viola?
I say viola.
Viola, okay, because I was like, is it the instrument or is it? And that's another thing that's really important. I want people who are listening, especially if you're white, you're not part of the BIPOC community, identifying that you don't know, admitting you don't know how to pronounce somebody's name and asking how to pronounce it can alleviate a microaggression. So there's an education piece right there. All right, so Brenda K. Johnson is a retired United States Army Reserve officer. After leaving military service, she homeschooled her son and daughter, who is Amber, for 5 years while working part-time, starting a business and volunteering within her community. The business, Creative Edge Enterprises, competed and won 2 franchise locations within the Philadelphia International Airport and Eddie's Ice Cream and Pizzeria Uno. Prior to opening the locations, they were sold for a substantial profit. At the same time, returning to part-time military training, she attended Command and General Staff College at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Brenda Kay attended California Polytech State University. Oh, I'm a California girl. I didn't know you were that. And as a speech communications major and completed her Bachelor of Science in Liberal Arts with a concentration in communications at Excelsior College. And Brenda grew up in a single parent home. However, her mother was a strong figure and businesswoman with a restaurant in New Haven, Michigan, and later as subcontractors for highway construction companies in Las Vegas and Reno. Business ownership was in her blood. In 2006, she and the family relocated to the Middle East to live and work for 3 years, returning to the USA in 2009. Do you speak other languages, Brenda?
No, I tried to learn Arabic. Oh my goodness, that's a whole
It's
story.
hard.
Oh, it is, unless you're speaking it continuously.
Right.
Amber, though, and Joe did pretty good, though.
Yeah, I took a semester of Arabic, and even though I got an A, I can't tell you anything for it. So there you go. I could actually probably read the alphabet, but I don't know what I'm saying. Just like with Hebrew, I learned Hebrew in elementary school, middle school. I can read the alphabet, don't know what it's saying. So we'll continue. Her son Joseph attended the American School of Doha, Qatar, where he graduated in June 2009. Her daughter Amber, this one here on this screen, attended the College of the North Atlantic in Doha, Qatar, becoming a star basketball player. Both children served in the armed forces. Brenda Kay lived in the United Arab Emirates and Kabul, Afghanistan, where her company competed for government contracts, and in Kampala, Uganda, where she started a chicken farm with locals. Currently, Miss Brenda Kay is writing her first novel, yes, and as a co-writer with an inmate imprisoned for over 30 years for a crime he did not commit. I'll say that again, for a crime he did not commit. She also worked on the Biden-Harris campaign, and that's how we met as a
I
field
know.
organizer.
That was amazing.
Volunteers as veterans coordinator with Veterans Resource Coalition and a member of Blue Star Mothers of America, an organization for parents with active duty children. Her hobbies consist of, my goodness, golfing, kayaking, fishing, working out, dancing, and singing and writing. Oh, we might have to sing together sometime. I'm a singer
That would be
songwriter.
fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be really cool. All right, so that is all Brenda, everybody. So give her a big welcome. And now we're going to move on to Amber
Okay, well,
Viola.
I did not write all that. So
Did not write all that? What do you mean you did not write all that? Where did it come from?
no, I mean I didn't write as much as she wrote.
Oh. That's okay. What I really loved is you both had a different twist on your bios. And I think what's really important is that they are who you are, right? You wrote what you needed to write at the time you wrote it, and we get to accept you right where you are. And I love both of them, so I'm going to read them. Is that all right? Can you remove your shame from not having as much as your mother had?
No, I can. Okay.
You can.
Let's be
Okay.
vulnerable here, people. Let's go.
There you go. Let's go. All right. So Amber Viola spent most of her life moving from base to base as her parents' jobs were transferred around the country. The final place Amber called home was Goldsboro, Pennsylvania, where she graduated from North Pocono High School. After graduating, she spent 1 year at the University of Scranton. This was the first place where racism and discrimination was a daily part of life. I'm actually glad to hear that that was the first place and that it wasn't a constant succession as many people have experienced, but I'm also very sad to hear that this is where you first met racism. The climate on campus was very racially insensitive, and many students would comment on how she was able to get into the U of S. The very few Black students were often told they were not allowed to attend parties or were not welcome in certain houses on campus. After completing her freshman year, Amber went to the United States Navy and completed 8 honorable years as a gunner's mate second class. Amber was often the only minority and only female in her workspace. She saw firsthand how hard it is to work in an environment where there are no minority supervisors or minorities in leadership positions. Oh, now I see why this has got you where you are. Okay, after leaving the Navy in 2018, Amber moved to Scranton to complete her degree in social work at Marywood University. Amber now works as the Human Resource Director for the City of Scranton. She is the highest ranking Black person at City Hall and one of few Black City of Scranton employees. Amber spent her life in predominantly white spaces and understands the importance of diversity. Amber currently lives in Scranton with her daughter and spends her time working with local community groups and educating the public on racial bias and the need for diversity in organizations, nonprofits, and local community groups. And it is a pleasure to have both of you here tonight. So just say hi to our attendees. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Deirdre, for being here. North Carolina, wow. Oh, cool, social work grad project. We'd love to hear more about that. Cheryl is in Bethlehem, field organizer on the Biden campaign. Yes, yay! And Leah from Clark Summit, Emma from Bristol, UK, and Caroline's from Connecticut. Wow, wonderful. Anybody else who's arrived that would like to say where you're zooming in from? I guess what I would love to do is just say hello, and Brenda and Amber take turns and say anything you would like to say on the top of your hearts right now. I set a safe container. I'd like the people who are our attendees, those people watching on Facebook, to know that this is a safe space to be brave. And that there is, if you don't agree with our panelists or with us, Jodi and myself, you can send me an email, but I don't want to get into dialogue or conversation or controversy or confrontation on this webinar. This is a safe place for Brenda and for Amber to share what they need to share about racism, about their lives, about their experiences, and and all should be kept as uh, safe and gentle and loving and inclusive. But I do want to invite people who are watching to ask questions, to share sentiments, to give love to our Black sisters, Brenda and Amber. So, welcome to the two of you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate it. And I really admire the work that you guys are doing. And, I think anytime you're trying to make the world a better place by putting yourself out there and stuff like that, always, that takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to be vulnerable and to talk about things that aren't often easy to talk about, and to talk about things where sometimes you just don't get it right all the time, or you might not say the right thing or say it in the right way. So definitely appreciate this space, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Amber. Yeah, we both decided that we would we're willing to make mistakes and be told, "Why'd you say that?" Or "How come you? That's racist right there." Like, oh my God. Okay. And you know what? I'll go, "Yep, you know what? If you say so, I believe it. Okay, I'll back off and I'll figure out a new way to say it because I realize that I don't know it all. I just don't." Fight my desire to know it all.
Yeah.
Brenda?
Yeah, and you know what? And none of us do. And I thank you because this is going to be generational. So I think that's good because we've had different experiences because I think it's been in different time periods. But unfortunately and fortunately, a lot of it is the same.
Mm.
I know our life situations are going to be different because even throughout life we never really lived in an all black community. The one I did one time in Los Angeles because my mother owned some properties in LA and I lived in one of the houses, and that became a whole different experience that I will go into on a whole another seminar. But the first thing for me, I just like to say is think about that you're born in a place, you don't know your ancestors, you know you're from Africa, but Africa is a continent, it's huge, you don't know where. So you have to spend your life tracing your family line and using ancestry right now, which has made it a lot easier trying to do that. And it's times where you've had experiences in life. And I know Amber had that experience in school, but so did I, where a teacher would say, okay, write a paper about your family history. And you could, at that point, I could only go back to my grandmother. I could not go at that point beyond my grandmother. Okay, now I can go back to my great grandfather. We can go back to 1805, but I don't know before that. I'm trying to trace it down myself to find out where exactly in Africa I'm from. I have no idea. So
It's
when
so funny because me and my best friend were talking literally about the story of how I failed a paper. I got an F on a paper because my teacher my sophomore year had told us to write about where we came from. And I went home and I told my mom, and she said, well, like, make it up, we don't know. So basically, what do you think would happen? And so I did that, and I made up this little African boy and did the whole, like, transatlantic passage and things like that. And I thought it was great. And I remember I had to read it in front of the class, and I killed off the boy. Like, he didn't make it, because over 10 million Africans died during the, when they were just trying to get to America here. So, statistically, most of us didn't even make it here to the country. And so I had, done that. And she was like, that's not the assignment. And she gave me an F. So I went home and told my mom. I'm pretty sure I said some things within there, but I didn't realize that that was racism. I didn't know that that was like a microaggression. You know, I just in my 16-year-old head thought she was an idiot and that she should have known that, like, well, obviously Black people don't know where they came from in Africa unless they're an actual like immigrant or, you know, a direct child of immigrants.
Mhm.
So it was just this, you know, so that's kind of how my mind played it out. And my mom was like, oh no, I'm coming to the school. Like, I'm gonna have some words with with your teacher. And it, you know, I ended up getting an A after that. But it was just, you know, those little things where people, that's something that people don't really realize. And that's like, that's the reason why we capitalize the word Black when you're talking about Black people or Black Americans, is because it represents a group of people who don't know what country they're coming from. So you're not, so you capitalize it the same way you would capitalize like Italian American, or like, you know, you're from, you know, Scotland or whatever. It's kind of the same concept there. So that's why we do that, because a lot of people have no idea where they came from. They took our history and you weren't allowed to speak your language or to read or to write. So, you know, that's what you want to do when you want to totally break up people down. America's not the first country to do that to people.
Right.
But I think part of seeing seeing our past and reconciling our past is to realize that a lot of us are here and we can consider ourselves Americans and Black Americans. And that's why we use the term Black, because we don't know where we came from. But that's just, it's funny because we were just talking about that, you know, me and my friend the other night.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. When we lived in the Middle East, and we lived there for 3 years as a family, basically, I think Amber came in for a year or so at that point. I think we were there for a year, right?
2. I came after, like, you guys were already there for like a year or something like that, I think.
Why I liked it is because I was an American. I wasn't, when I lived in Uganda, when I lived in Afghanistan, anywhere but America, I am an American. I'm not a Black American. I'm not a Chinese American. I'm not an Asian American. You are an American. Only in America is it this title. They never really say a title when you're white American. You're just an American. But any other race, you have this Chinese, I'm Black American, I'm this. And that's real interesting. So my best years were living overseas, honestly. I loved it. I loved living in the Middle East. I loved living in Africa, which was really, you know, it was exciting. And living in Afghanistan, believe it or not, I was there as a contractor, and then I came back and I lived what we call outside of the wire. Outside of the wire means I didn't live on the base. I lived out in the community. It was in the area where a lot of the international people lived. It was kind of down the road from the embassies, but it was kind of where some of the embassies housed their people in that region. So we called it outside of the wire. I mean, I used the markets in Afghanistan, and I believe in respecting a culture. So I covered when I just had to cover my head, when I was there. But man, I didn't really have any problems living in Afghanistan, to be very honest. Did they stare at me? Yes. I was the only Black person you saw anywhere I went. So did they know I didn't belong there and that I didn't live there? Yes. But they were friendly. Oh my God, they were friendly. That's why when we discriminate against Muslims and we think everybody's a terrorist, well, having lived in Afghanistan and living in the Middle East, I know that's such a racist lie. I mean, it really, really is. It's just like thinking everybody that's Black carries a boom box on their head and bebops down the street or something.
Okay, nobody is carrying boom boxes.
No. No, the technology is really advanced, and I saw a lot more white guys wearing boom boxes on
I
the
hated
floor than I
myself
did.
again. You wanted to add?
So
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, it's
curious.
just you do
Go
get
ahead.
really stereotyped into these kind of black tropes all the time, especially being like a darker woman. You get stereotyped as like aggressive, or ooh, you're sassy, or you're ghetto, or you're a bitch, or whatever it is. And a lot of those things just aren't true, and there's not a lot of room for black people to be anything other than stereotypical, where you fit in that box. um I've heard people tell me like, well, you're not black because I don't fit the box and fit the mold of what they assume a black person should be. So, you're not black enough because you're not ghetto, and I think you're supposed to be kind of this like caricature of a person, and you don't fit into that. So I'm gonna, erase your blackness, instead of just realizing that black people are not a monolith, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and there's people that are like different things. There's blurs, which are black nerds, which love the nerd culture and Star Wars and different things like that. And you have they're kind of come across all spectrums. And I think that people don't realize that, just because you don't see it in the media, you don't see it portrayed on the screen, and that kind of affects people's interpretations of you, especially being here in NEPA, where you run into a lot of people who've never actually met a black person before, or don't have black friends, or don't really know any black people.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll ask you questions, and you can tell those questions are kind of based on like a stereotype. I've been invited over people's houses for dinner, and they're like, well, what do you eat? I'm like, well, I'm probably gonna eat whatever. What do you eat? But they're expecting kind of like a specific thing. I've had people ask me, well, do you eat fried chicken like every meal? Or if
Every
I've been
meal.
places like picking out a drink, and they're like, oh, are you gonna get grape soda? Like, no, I'm not gonna get grape soda.
Wow.
But it's because you have these stereotypes that have been around for so long,
Yeah.
that they kind of put you into this trope of a person. And there's so many more things, to black people. Black women are the most educated group of people in the US. And you don't know that, you don't hear that, that's not celebrated. When you hear about black women, a lot of times it's in the context of like, oh, you're a single mother, or you're on welfare, or you're doing whatever. And those stereotypes and things just aren't really true. And it's always funny when I get asked to like go talk about something, and they realize that I don't really fit into that stereotype. Like, I had gotten invited to come talk about, housing and things like that, but specifically like Section 8 and kind of things. And I was like, guys, I really have no idea what any of this is. Like, I I can look it up and I can help you, but to talk from experience, like, that's not my experience. So it's just frustrating, because it's, we're not all the same, and people come in from different places. And when you're up here living in a place that's, all white, you're gonna have the same taste as basically the people you're around constantly. So, they say like you would have more in common with a white person who was like raised in a similar way than you, than a black person who was raised in a different way than you, depending on where you're at. So if you are in a city, regardless of your race, you're going to have more in common with other city people. If you're a country, then you're going to be a country person, and you're going to have more in common with that. And all of these things kind of, play into the role where it's like a surprise when black people are good at something, or a surprise when, you achieve something, because so many of our achievements and things aren't publicized, and you don't really hear about it. And what's really publicized often is, crime or anything negative. And, that just isn't always the case. It's just not true.
That's so true. It really is. And what's been interesting, I can say, in my life is I've had it from both sides. What I mean by that, I've lived in an area that Black people thought I was a narc. And they thought I was a narc and an undercover because of the way I speak. So I was never trusted in the Black area by my own people. I didn't fit in. They thought I was a narc. They thought I was an undercover agent. And I mean, that was in LA. That was really, really a trip. It was really interesting going through that experience. And, you know, being called names by your own people that because you didn't fit their stereotype. So you kind of sometimes can be caught in between two worlds that are just real interesting. But I really kind of want to just share something. I grew up in New Haven, Michigan. And I'm heartbroken as to everything going on in Michigan right now. I really, really am. I never had any of those. I never had a racial experience that I can remember in Michigan. But I think as a kid, unless you're straight out called a name, you don't really know some things are happening to you that may be happening to you. Yeah. But I know we grew up in Michigan in an integrated area. We went to baseball games. We played with all of our neighbors. We all rode our bikes together. So I don't remember anything standing out living in Michigan. And then we moved to California, and that was where real racism started. That is just so funny to me. They say California is the most liberal place. Well, my experience wasn't that it was that liberal. Yeah, it may be liberal with weed, and it may be liberal on that, you know, that end. But with racism, California is real interesting. I had just, for number one, I was there when Ronald Reagan was the governor. Oh. So my experience of Ronald Reagan was never good, ever. Ronald Reagan marched my high school teachers out. They marched all of our school out onto the football field. And I can't remember why this was happening at the time, because they were going through integration at a time that they didn't have to integrate because it was going to naturally integrate because of where the school was. So the school I was going to at that time was basically predominantly white, but it was going to self-integrate because of the way LA was laid out. Because down the road, probably about less than 10 miles was all Black. So it was going to self-integrate. So why they felt they had to start this forced busing, I thought was goofy, just looking at it from my perspective. But Ronald Reagan, I had a Black history teacher, and at that point, he considered all Black history teachers and all Black teachers as communists. So he arrested all of our teachers. And so I became a real radical after that. I mean, I started going, I don't know how my mom let us go on the bus from LA up to San Francisco to Angela Davis rallies. I don't know what we told her, but she let us do that. And I can't remember who went with us, but I went to some of Angela Davis's rallies and really just, became radical within myself because I hated Ronald Reagan. So when he became president and they talked about how great he was, I was traumatized the entire time that man was the president. I really was, because I just had some bad experiences with him, his brutal self. So in California, I remember being stopped. Every time I got stopped by the police in California, I got called every name that you can imagine for no reason. So I learned how to deal with the police, so I really wouldn't ever get whatever problems with them. But the good thing was that when the military academy, I work with the military academy, where I produced, instead of being a drill sergeant, I was on the officer side as a tactical officer where I produced officers. And so I worked with all sheriffs, LA County sheriffs, LAPD, state CHP, the California Highway Patrol, and detectives. And we would sit around at night when we would be at the 2-week camp. We would sit around and talk all night. And they had been through some gruesome experiences. So I started to get to know police from a different perspective as the people I worked with. And I figured this is why some of them are crazy. But anyway, that's what I got to know them from a different perspective because they had been through so many things. But as I got older, I found out, okay, when you get pulled over, before you stop, get your registration out, and have it like right there. Have your driver's license right there. Don't move suddenly. And I had to teach my son this. When you hear about Black mothers that taught their sons this, I did, because I was petrified when he started driving. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Don't move suddenly. Make sure you have all your documents in front of you so you don't have to reach and get anything. And nobody else in America ever has to do that when they get pulled over by police. And then it aggravates me when people say, well, he must have did something. No, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything other than what you would do. What do you do when you get pulled over? You get your wallet out. You would get your driver's license out. You would get your registration out. We can't do that. We better have that stuff out in advance and have it right there and have your hands where they can be seen.
Well, whenever they ask you that question, I'm like, oh, well, what were they doing, or what did you do, or whatever? That just goes back to they think we're just these, ghetto creatures that don't know how to act right in any situation. And it's like, no, I was a regular human being who got pulled over. I had my stuff ready. And, I've had interactions where I would just get stopped and get my car searched, and then they would just drive away because they wouldn't find anything. I've had times where I've had my car searched and they were mad at me because my car was clean and I didn't have anything in it. But part of that was back to, my mom telling us, don't have a bunch of stuff in your glove box and you can't find your registration. So, and then I've had to sit on the side of the road. I've been told to lay down on the side of the road. I've had a police throw my registration at me and tell me he didn't give a fuck that I was in the military. Literally the same exact thing happened to my brother in a completely different state. And, we've never been the type of people to be disrespectful or anything like that. But that's still always the first question that you get asked when you say you've had a negative interaction with a police officer. And it's, you don't have to do anything. But you literally get almost like PTSD, your heart starts pounding, you're sweating, your palms are sweaty and stuff. And then do you seem nervous? Absolutely, you seem nervous because you're terrified that you're going to do the right thing and they're going to shoot you, and then they're going to justify it. And they're going to say, well, Amber Amber was aggressive. She had an attitude, or she reached for something, probably reached for my registration, but, and you don't ever get kind of the benefit of the doubt in those things. And people just assume the worst all the time. And you have a whole population of people who is crying out and saying, like, we're getting treated terribly. And, instead of people trying to find out why and what's happening, they kind of blame us. I feel like racism and rape are like the two things that happen to you where it's your fault regardless. Like they're always going to find a way to blame you for something. If you tell somebody that somebody was racist towards you, that, well, what did you do, or what did you say, or maybe they didn't mean it like that, or maybe they didn't do this, or it's always some type of excuse. And it's like, no, you're presenting yourself in the same way you present yourself to everybody else. And honestly, at the same time, who cares if you were disrespectful? Disrespect isn't a reason to get killed. Well, if you're in a position of power, like, you should be able to handle somebody being rude.
Because, we all saw what happened to Jacob Blake, right? He walked away from the police, but they didn't need to shot 7 bullets in his back.
Right.
So the question of, and yeah, I want to say too, thank you, Cheryl, for acknowledging that. I want to say I'm sorry that has happened to you, Amber, and it drives me crazy, Brenda, that you have to have this kind of dialogue with your children. I think about a woman whose child has a boy has turned 16, and they're nervous about their kid driving on the road because they're worried about the way their son drives. Exactly. But you are worried about your son getting on the road because you're afraid that he's going to get shot and killed.
Exactly.
And Jacob Blake, It doesn't matter if he had done something wrong or not. Whatever he did, there was no justification for shooting him in the back. And so
My
this
Yeah.
is
son
a
was
systemic
injured.
issue. This is a real systemic issue from down to families. I mean, the fact that you have so much PTSD makes total sense that when they come to your window, you're going to be shitting bricks, right?
Yeah.
You're scared. Of course you're scared.
My ex-husband, he's white, and one time we got pulled over, and I remember he had a very cavalier attitude towards the police, and he was smoking out his window, and they ended up pulling up like multiple police cars. So like a cop came to his side of the window, and he kind of gave him an attitude, and I literally was like, do not act like this. Like, this is not the time for you to like try to be macho or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to die. So please don't act your normal self and just sit down and be quiet. But he just had such a different attitude about it because he honestly wasn't worried about anything happening to him. You
Exactly.
know, I was worried. I was the one who was driving, and I was worried about something happening to me, you know, and those types of things don't really cross people's minds all the time. But these conversations that we have are throughout our lives. You know, I remember growing up and my mom not letting us bring anything into the store because she would tell us they're going to think we steal it. I had to have the same conversation with my daughter. And we've had an instance in Target where she had her frozen sunglasses, and we're getting ready to leave. And the lady's like, oh, we're going to pay for that. And I'm like, well, no, because they're hers. And it turns into a thing, you know, and they're stopping us. And she's looking at me because she knows we got in a disagreement about it before we got out the car, and I didn't want her to take it. And she looks at me and she says, I'm sorry, mommy. You know, that's not a burden that she should have to carry, you know, at all. And that's not something I want her to recognize either. And I have to make sure that I'm keeping myself together. So first of all, I don't want to be a bad example to her and just, you know, cuss somebody out, which was my first instinct. But
Yeah.
second, it's like who I asked my friends, I said, do you have to have these conversations with your kids before you go into a store and tell them don't take anything because they're going to assume because you're Black that you stole it, you know? And so there's so many things that Black people have to do constantly to just live their lives in a normal way and just to not be constantly accused, you know, of different things, the things that other people do and can act when they go into a store or bring into a store, different things. We just don't have that luxury. I never bring sunglasses with me into a store because I just already know I don't have time for that. You know, I tell my daughter, I don't let her bring toys into the store. And the only reason I honestly let her bring the frozen sunglasses because they were kind of broken and and they looked old. So I was like, okay, well, I think they should be okay. But you know, these are conversations that you're having with kids who are 4, you know, and then she's, you know, well, why did the lady think, you know, these are my sunglasses? Why did she think that they weren't mine? How am I supposed to navigate that conversation and try to really explain that? Well, you're Black and people are going to think you're a terrible person, you know, and it's like,
Yeah. Wow.
I know. And just my last police thing was my son, who is, when he's in the States, is in North Carolina. So honestly, I'm petrified. To be very honest, I wasn't so much in Florida because I lived in Florida, and as long as you're in the tourist area of those places, you're fine, really. And he calls Florida Flobama because he was in the he was in the Panhandle. So as long as you're in the tourist, you're fine. But he got pulled over 1 a.m. in uniform on his way to go to a flight because he's on a flight crew. So he had on his flight jumpsuit and he was deploying 2 days later. This police threw the book at him for every single thing imaginable. And my son said, Mom, he just tried to make me act up. He said he tried. He said, Mike, I remembered everything that we had gone through my whole life. And I was so polite to him. And he just told me he was really an ass. Now, I just want to go back now since I'm older. When I get pulled over now, I remember one time in California, we stayed in Palm Springs, and I was coming back from dropping off my son in Vegas at the airport. We would drive we would drive a lot of times, a lot of miles. We would fly into fly into Vegas, and then usually stay in California a lot of times. But anyway, we drove to drop my son off in Vegas, and we were driving back to Palm Springs. And it was my mother and I. And man, I know I was doing probably 85 or 90. I know I was. This police pulled me over, and by the time he pulled me over, he was mad. I mean, his face was so red. He was so mad. And I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to calm him down. And so what I do is I have everything in my hand. I was in a rental car, and I said, you know what, officer, I am so sorry. I was speeding. I admit it. I said, I got up at the crack of dawn, because we have to go through a whole story. We have to go through a whole scenario when we get pulled over. You know, I said I was speeding. I said I was dropping my son off. He's on active duty. He had to get back. I said, and this is my mom. She's 90 something. I said, wow, she's here celebrating her birthday. She's a twin. I talked to him so much. I calmed him down. He went from here to here. And by the time he finished, he was like, well, damn, you went through this whole story. Wait, and then he said to me, he said, quit driving so fast with your mother in the car. And we were laughing. I said, you know what, officer, you are right. And he said, I'm not going to give you a ticket. I'm just going to give you a warning, you know. But we have to go through this whole story scenario. And Amber, you got to tell them about why you don't carry anymore, your story with the police. And because Amber has a concealed carry permit, but she doesn't even really carry anymore because it's dangerous for me to be Black and carry a weapon, even with the proper permits. But go ahead, please. That story's a
Before you do, I just want to say, Brenda, that is a talent, number one, to be able to calm people down. And I think my mother was able to do that too, but it was in different scenarios. She didn't have to face what you had to face. And I think that's a real important it's a real important disparity that we have, right? I mean, you're talking about somebody who's in law enforcement, who's carrying a gun, can be very dangerous when they're angry, right? Anybody can be dangerous when they're angry. We can be dangerous when we're angry. And the fact that you knew what you needed to do, and even with your own maybe nervousness and fear, you did what you needed to do, and that then you created a connection with this
yes.
officer. I think it's all people should try to do that, but the very first thing you did was you admitted that you did something wrong.
Right.
And the ownership is so important. I think there's such the law enforcement and other people will come right out and lie. And you sat there and you told the truth.
I find if I'm wrong, because it's been times I was driving Uber and the officer said, he stopped me. And I was like, why is he stopping me? Because I always made sure my tail lights and everything were fixed. And he said, well, your tail light is out. I said, you're kidding. And I'm going to tell you, guy said, do you mind if I get out of the car and go to the back and look? He said, no. I said, well, sir, I need you to get in my car, sit in the seat, and put your foot on the brake. So I walked to the back of my car, and I said, well, how do you like that? I said, I get these tail lights fixed. So he walks back to the, and I got a customer in the back. I had a customer in the back. So he comes up to the front. But I de-escalated it because he knew I had nothing to hide. Because I said, can you get in the car for me, please? Put your foot on the brake. I said, because that is impossible. My tail light is out because I just fixed it myself. I told him, I said, I repaired it 2 days ago. But sometimes you can't escalate it because they're too paranoid. And with Black men, I find it's different. They're paranoid and they just have this illusion of something. But go ahead, Amber. You got to
Yep,
share
go
this
ahead, Amber.
about
Yep,
the
thanks for
women.
sharing that, Brenda. Wow.
So it was I when I first moved back here, it was 3 years ago. Actually, like my 3 year anniversary of being back in the area was like this week. And I had my concealed carry and I was in the grocery store because I was going to my mom's house and I was like in a shopping plaza. So there's a bunch of different things around in the same area. I was going to get beer, I was getting liquor, I was getting pizza, I was at the grocery store. And I was putting Jacqueline in a car and a police officer rolled up on me and like got out his car, and I have Jacqueline in my arms and I'm like, and can I help you? And I'm kind of freaked out. And he's like, I got a call that like somebody had a gun and you basically matched like the description of that. And I was like, oh, my name is Amber. I graduated from North Pocono High School. I just left the Navy. Like, I'm a veteran. Like, I live here. I'm from the area, and I'm saying all these things so he doesn't think that I'm just some like out of town person who like doesn't belong in the area or whatever. And so he kind of laughed a little bit. And then I was like, why are you stopping me? What is happening? And he's like, well, somebody called and she said that, she saw a black person with a gun in a grocery store. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, when could she have seen a gun? Because I had it on me, and I realized that I was in like the bread aisle and I bent over because Jacqueline dropped like her binky and I went to pick it up and she must have been behind me and saw my handle sticking out and then I guess feared for her life in the dairy aisle and went and called the police, and I just looked at him and I was like, I'm with my kid, this is a very scary situation. And I asked, because I was now mad and I'm asking him like, well, what can you do to like go find this lady? Because I don't think it's okay that she went and called the police on you. I said, she didn't say anything to anybody in the grocery store. That was probably when almost I first was in there. So I was in there for a while, walking around, like checked out, have a baby with me. And after that, I didn't carry, I've carried a few times, but I haven't carried as much as I did before because I was honestly terrified that in that moment when he rolled up on me, got out the car real quick, like that could have been it for me. Because he's thinking, because if you call the police and you say like, oh, a black person has a gun,
Yeah,
you're not saying it's
Yep.
holstered. You're not saying it's like concealed anywhere. And I saw it when she was bending over. They're making it sound like I was in the bread aisle, flinging my gun around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I was telling you, I was like, that's not okay. You cannot do that. And he was like, you're right. That's not, but I'm assuming nothing probably was done about it. And he turned out to be a nice guy, but it's just, you shouldn't have to live your life in fear like that and have to explain away why I'm in Moscow, Pennsylvania, Daleville, Pennsylvania, when I grew up there, but I felt the need that I really had to make sure he knew, like, I was still active duty at the time, that like, I'm in the Navy, I grew up here, I went to high school right down the street, like, basically, please don't kill me, because some lady called and, and said I had a gun. But it just shows like my mom said, people are just terrified of us, to where I'm, I probably looked a mess, was in there with my daughter, just trying to grab stuff and, just living my life. And you have somebody who is scared of you while you're grocery shopping because they see you have a gun. And in the area that we lived in, everybody has guns all the time. So it wasn't anything. Right. It wasn't like I was carrying a gun in New York City where, you have really strict gun laws and things like that. But
no,
it's crazy. Yeah.
Totally racist. I mean, let's put that on the list. Yep, that one. Yep. Wow. So I'm curious, how do you feel about the election?
Like right now?
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, this is systemic racism, right? You had the siege at the Capitol. Nobody was shot and killed necessarily. I mean, if you had black people there, what would it have been, right?
A massacre.
It would have been a bloodbath, right? And here we have this coming week. I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension
I was
For
having a panic attack watching it, the fact that it was such a double standard. I was freaking out the fact that it was such a double standard.
yep.
And even all the news commentators on the channels I listened to knew that it was a double standard.
Yep.
And we're like looking at this, and I mean, and when they started climbing up the walls and kicking down, I mean, it was just really just so amazing to me. And it was just purely white privilege. It's they can get away with so much that we can never do. And it's like we can get accosted for not doing anything, and they can get away with beating up police, slapping them around. I mean, beating the crap out of them. It was really, I was panicked watching it because I kept thinking if it was Black people, they would all be dead. When the moment they touched the stairs, everybody, they would have gone, and shot everybody. Oh, climbing up the building, you gotta be kidding. Okay, they would have all been dead. So it was just so amazing to me. It really was. And I won't even go into the whole thing about the election, the votes were fake or whatever, because it was almost all Black votes. So every time in America that Black people have been successful, you go all the way back to like 1870, the Reconstruction period. They became successful. They had their own areas. They ran for positions. Then Jim Crow, the lynching, on and on and on through history. Black Wall Street, they became successful. They had their own businesses, their own hotels. They come in there, they bomb it, they burn it. And so this has gone on through history. So fast forward, we're supposedly in 2020, you vote. And when it's predominantly people of color voting, it was illegal. They cheated. They don't vote. None of them have voted. They had to be dead people. So this is typical. The same thing Martin Luther King just marched about, we're experiencing right now. It's a history repeating itself, it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was definitely it was hard to watch just as like an American sitting and watching it, and then when you add on the layer of just knowing how, we were out here protesting all last summer in DC and throughout all these major cities and stuff like that. And, we just were not met by the same level of peace. And I think that people feel like we want other people to be shot at. We don't. We want to be treated the same way that they were treated when they were storming the Capitol, and all of them are alive. They're committing felonies. You're breaking into a federal building, and there's a lot of people that were armed. There's people that had bombs, and it's just, I remember what the Capitol looked like when Black Lives Matter was in the lawn outside of the Capitol. They weren't on the steps. They weren't trying to get into the building. They were literally just outside of the Capitol. And there was the National Guard fully in riot gear on the steps. And I'm sure that, you guys have seen those pictures. And the fact that none of that happened at all. And, it's almost like, it's not almost like, it is like that they, were in cahoots with people that were in there, and, they just didn't have that same level of preparedness or care, or I guess fear. And I think kind of, people ended up dying and getting hurt. And I think a lot of people realize, wow, they don't really care about anybody except themselves. But it just, it was a level of, I genuinely felt like nobody cares about Black people at all in America ever. Like, that is, I looked at that and that's how I felt. And it just, it broke my heart, because I knew that like they would have shot us indiscriminately and nobody would have even raised a finger, because they would have said, well, they tried to break into the Capitol, so they deserved it. And it goes back to, like I said, you committing a crime or doing something doesn't justify being killed, but I know that they would have justified that. And it's just so sad and it's heartbreaking. And I honestly truly believe that people seeing that is going to have the same effect that when they saw Black people being attacked by dogs and sprayed by fire hoses in the 60s when it first was televised. I think that this is kind of having the same effect, because there's a lot of people who didn't normally say anything who are like, wow, they really kind of treated these people completely different, you know, and I'm hoping that that really has an effect. And I want to be hopeful and positive throughout the inauguration and things, and thinking that it's going to get better. But it's frustrating, and it's slow, because we feel like we've been fighting for the same things since long before I was born, you know, just to be treated equal, just to be treated like human beings. And seeing that happen, just, you know, you feel like your life doesn't mean anything, because, you know, what would they say if we were doing that? There was the veteran that was killed, and I remember last summer marching for a Black veteran, Reed, who was killed by the police, live on Facebook, and nobody cared that he was a veteran. I had to search article after article to even find out that he was a veteran. Nobody did a think piece about if he had PTSD or mental illness. You know, there wasn't things written about how does his family feel or anything like that. He was just dead, you know, and people are, you know, trying to make this woman some martyr. Well, she was a veteran. Okay, there's a lot of Black veterans that get killed by police officers and nobody cares about them. So you don't care about their service. The only thing that you give a shit about is the fact that they're white. That's it. You don't care about anything else. Because if you did, then all these people would be treated with the same level of respect and the same level of consideration for them. But they're not. There was just a little boy who got killed who had autism, you know, by the police. And it's, you know, I'm not sure if he was a BIPOC person, but he was different. He was outside of that kind of that norm, you know, to where now he's scary and different things. And he was just a kid. And they say, you know, that they were afraid for their life and different things. And that's the same thing that they say to us. And, you know, it's in it, but these things are looked at as justifiable.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely the standard line. But I will tell you, if Trump won, I was leaving America. I told Amber I wasn't staying here and being caged. Okay. I told her I was moving out of America if he won. So I am so glad that man didn't win the election, because he scared the bejesus out of me. And I was moving out of America if he won.
You know,
he just snuck in, he just ruined protections for LGBTQ people to be able to adopt from a federal agency that has taxpayer money. Like, he just does so many things to minority groups of people, you know, across the board that he's been doing the whole time. And it's just like, he really doesn't care about anybody who is outside of that, you know, very white, straight thing. And he just doesn't
really
care about people.
them either. I mean,
no, he doesn't.
As soon as they turn around, he's right on them too. I mean, but I'm not saying to take that away from the way he treats.
No, right.
Yeah, but what I liked hearing, Amber, and this is the hardest part, I think. Well, let me try to rephrase this. What I liked hearing from you was, this is scary, this is awful, this is unacceptable, this is shit, and I have hope. And that's my button to take my medicine. Anyways, and I have hope. And I think that what, you know, one of the things I talk to people about often is there's this duality, there's this coexistence, right? So this hurts. This is really, excuse my language, everybody watching. I know it's going to be not explicit. Anyways, it's fucked up, okay? And when we come together and we do the work, look what Stacey Abrams has done, right? When we come together and we pull each other together, we can do so much. Granted, Biden now needs to do a lot to change what's happened in the last 4 years, to go back to what we were 4 years ago, so then we can move forward again. And yet, if we have hope, and part of that hope is taking care of ourselves, being a community, coming together, speaking. I think somebody said, Una said, true talk, Amber. Speaking the truth, right? We can have this coexistence of, this really hurts. And I am hopeful that this pain is going to diminish, reduce, not necessarily go away, but, you know, that we're going to work together to make it happen. And you too were so instrumental in our area, with the election. I mean, Jodi and I were so grateful. Wow, something right here in our town, this small little town. So, I just love the fact that your hope is carrying you forward, and I am devastated by your pain. It's, and I know it's not just your pain, all Black people. Um, so yeah, I had to put that out there. Jodi, did you have something you look like you were about to say something, and I think I always cut her off.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so I don't know where, we've got a lot of work to do, right? And when you were mentioning the being in uniform and not caring if they were a veteran, not caring if they were Black, it goes back to the very first caste system, Jim Crow, and then and how they turned the poor white people against the Black people because and created this hierarchy, right? Where now these poor white people have to be upset with Black people because Black people have rights now, and they certainly don't want Black people to have more rights than they do. And so, oh, you got a uniform arm? Oh, you're being cocky. Pow, shoot, dead, whatever. I mean, it's like, what the fuck? Like, it's but that's what they did, right? That was what the Jim Crow era and other place at time frames where it's like Black people cannot rise because it's threatening to white, especially
and that error really affected where Black people are right now.
Yes.
Because when you had the greatest generation fighting in the wars and things like that, when they were coming home, they were using their GI Bill, they were going to school, they were buying houses, and that was, my grandparents and stuff in that generation, and Black people were left out of those things. We weren't allowed to use federally, we were given GI Bill, but it was up to the states and the banks and the mortgage lenders to really accept that and to use and to allow Black people to use it, and they just did not allow them to use it. So when white people were building wealth for their families and building education in their families and buying houses and buying land, Black people were left out of that. Native people were left out of that. And so now when you look at this system of, the ghettos and where people are in poverty and a welfare cycle, you have to look back to where it started, and you have to be willing to say, we were left out of this situation and we were left out of the ability to build wealth for our families. And that's why a lot of people are in the same place that they're in right now. They created whole new laws just to stop Black people from buying homes. They started redlining, they started creating projects and things like that to herd people in together. And then you had things like white flight happening. And when white people would move out of an area, they would take all the manufacturing business out of the area. They would take all the jobs out of the area along with them. So it wasn't like they left anything in place. They would literally take a whole structure and leave only the people of color there, and then wonder, oh, well, this all Black city, Detroit, now is nothing, and Black people are nothing, but we're not seeing why and what happened and the reason behind that. And so a lot of the issues that the Black community faces now happened years ago, and I think around the time of Jim Crow and through the 60s and 70s, it was still legal to discriminate against people. It was still legal to deny them loans and to deny them, insurance, and to not allow them to be in certain hospitals and certain places and different things. Or if an area got too Black, it was legal for you just to pick up and move out of there and close down a school and close down a hospital and close down community centers. And they just left devastation in their wake. And now we look at some of these places that used to be amazing. And I've heard people say, well, Black people have destroyed the cities. And it's like, well, what happened? Why, what is the reason that these places are so terrible now? And you find that it's because people would just up and move because Black people were allowed to have rights in that area. When people were moving during the Great Migration up north, they were hoping that it was going to be different and that it was going to be a better place. But once they settled and they started being able to create their own businesses and create their own lives and things like that, that's when it freaked people out, and they picked up and took everything and moved, and then left laws in place that disfranchised people. And now you have places where You have high schools in Detroit and Chicago that don't have heat, that don't have air conditioning, they don't have enough desks in their classroom. Their classrooms have mold. You can't go to the bathroom in your school because the water is so full of lead that you're not allowed to wash your hands in school. You know, you're not allowed to drink out of the water fountain in school. You have to wear a coat and gloves and hat in the winter because there's no heat.
Yeah.
And then we want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and, you know, and go on to be millionaires when you're coming out of that terrible environment. And it stems from the time in Jim Crow and all those times when it just was catastrophic and people left and pulled everything out of there, and they just left devastation, and we're just dealing with that same devastation that we're dealing with now. And it's, you know, it's so frustrating because it's just so unfair, and the burden is always on us to pull ourselves out of the mud and to be better when you're literally giving nothing. You know, you're going to these schools where you have barely any teachers, or your school gets unaccredited. And so now you went to a high school that loses their accreditation. You can't go to college. You wasted 4 years of your life. Or they close a school in an inner city area and they don't allow busing. And now you have an area where kids were once going to school. There's no school there. They can't get to school because there's no buses. So what are they supposed to do? They drop out and they start doing other things to help their families make money and to probably keep themselves from being bored. And
then white drug lords come in,
right.
and capture these kids to become drug lords themselves, and then they get put in jail because, you know,
The beat goes on. Let me share something real quick about what Amber had said. My mother and father moved to, my sister was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which seems so weird. But anyway, even to me, but my mom, and she barely talked about this. I could barely get this story out. My mom and dad started a business in Minnesota, a car wash, and it was burnt down. It was burnt down. The people burn it down. So once again, you're starting from scratch. You know, and I don't know the timing because I was born in Washington, D.C. So I don't know if they moved from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. because my sister and I are 11 months apart. So I don't know if they moved then, but it was like, yeah, so they started over again. They started over again. So every time, sometimes you would try to get something going, you have to start over, so you don't have the generational wealth because every generation starting from scratch. So that means you know, so you know what I'm saying? So my mom's generation tried to pass something on, and basically she was a single mom the majority of her life. She tried to pass something on, and then I'm trying to pass something on, but you're basically starting over every generation.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think is considered. And why is that? Because it's still, loans are still difficult to get. Even with I'm fighting something right now, believe it or not, on a predatory loan. Okay, so it's still in existence right now to this day. When your credit is just as good as somebody else's credit, you may not get the best interest rate and the best loans or the ability to get the equal loans, even when your credit is better than someone else that's coming in. I'm telling you, it's still there. It's still there to this day.
I mean, you know, even if you look at the wealth gap and things like that, being college educated Black woman, I make statistically less than a white woman who dropped out of high school, you know? So you have like all of these things that work against people. And, you know, and then you have people sitting on the sidelines like, I wonder why they're not getting it together. And it's like, there's so much in the background and there's so much that's constantly just working against you. And you always just have to be twice as good and work twice as hard all the time. And there was like a book written that said, if you're in actual poverty, it would take 20 years of you working hard to get out of poverty, but with nothing bad happening, like nothing catastrophic, nothing happening to where you got to like pay an emergency bill or, you know, anything like that. It's 20 years of hard work with nothing terrible happening. That's the only way that you can do it, because systematically things are just so, you know, one-sided.
Mhm. Well, you know, and thinking about as an educator, thinking about what this pandemic has done for access to education, right? I mean, so 20 years of building yourself without anything bad happening, and then we have disasters such as this, a catastrophic experience, and you've
Yeah,
got some schools with
I
children who
know.
can afford to have education because they can get laptops, they have Wi-Fi, they have internet, and you have other schools where there's no access to technology, no Wi-Fi, no nothing, and how are
Even
they supposed to
in
continue their
Scranton,
education? What's that?
And
even,
nobody cares. It
And
should be,
even in
they should be
Scranton.
yelling about this every single news cycle every day, that there are kids who have been going to school for a year virtually that do not have internet and do not have a computer. And I don't understand how anybody thinks that that is just supposed to continue happening. What are they going to do next year when they go in school? They
right,
have been out of school the whole time.
yep.
It's
And
it's
actually,
crazy.
this is a good moment for maybe to bring it up. I didn't plan this transition, but just everybody who's in attendance, Jodi and I will be giving some money to Brenda and Amber because they wanted to buy some laptops for some children who don't have any. So if you are wanting to donate towards that, do you have a Venmo or a cash, anything that they can?
I do. I do.
Go ahead, Amber,
I
and put
have
it in the
a
chat because anybody who's
okay.
attending, they can also contribute money towards your cause of getting laptops to children who don't have them. And so please,
It's so
please, please
ridiculous.
support this
That's
beautiful
ridiculous.
cause. Yeah, it is ridiculous.
Doesn't even make sense. And this is in Scranton. We're not talking about going to the inner city. We're talking about in Scranton,
Mhm.
there are kids who do not have laptops to be able to go to school and finish school. That does not make sense to me. It
You
just
know,
is
we
heart-wrenching.
where I was teaching in California, we were a huge school district, and there were conversations
Where were
going.
you?
I was in Northern California and the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so but in the school district where I was teaching, huge school district, and there were conversations on Facebook, and these people are like, "Yeah, we're ready to go. We've got laptops being delivered to all of our students, and this is going to be great." And I wrote in saying, "What about the schools that don't get to have laptops? What do you mean schools that don't get to have laptops?" And I'm like, what? You know that we have schools in our district where kids don't have laptops. They don't have money for laptops. They don't even have internet at home. They're like, what? No. And I'm like, yeah, you are a teacher at a school that is affluent, that is in Walnut
Yep.
Creek, California, that raises anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year from the parents. And you're talking about schools literally 3 miles away.
Right.
You know, so and most of the schools that don't have the money, guess who's in attendance there?
Yep.
Mostly BIPOC, right?
It was so frustrating because I remember coming up to it last year, coming up to where we knew schools were going to go virtual. And there were so many people, and it was literally people on both sides. You had people on the one side where I don't want my kid to wear a mask all day, so I want them to have virtual school. And then there's people on the other side where I don't want my kid to get coronavirus, so I want virtual school. And there was no one saying, hey, what about kids that don't have computers at home, that don't have internet at home, whose parents work all day? What are they
Right,
supposed to do? Where
right.
are they supposed to go? There's kids who are almost who are like going to babysitters
Hmm.
all day. Their parents get off of work at 5:30. The kids get home, and now is when they can go on a computer and do their schoolwork at 5:30 for a full day's work. Now, multiple kids, one computer.
Hmm.
You know, I my last laptop that I was able to purchase for a family went to a family of 5 who was living in a hotel. They were doing schoolwork from their mom's phone using a hotspot. I
Wow.
don't even know how they even managed to do that. The kids are amazing because they're actually still getting very good grades and they're doing so great. But
They're
nobody thought
resourceful, but they
of
shouldn't have to be.
they shouldn't have to do that, and nobody thought about them.
Right.
You know, when these decisions were being made, nobody was thinking about the poor kids
Hmm.
who, or kids whose parents work. Like, that's really great that you want to have virtual school for your child, but you're already a stay-at-home parent.
Right.
So what are you going to do for the single parent homes or both parents are working. You know, there was no consideration. And I've had people message me and say, Amber, I am so sorry because I advocated for virtual school and I never thought about that. I only thought about my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and it's so tragic and it's so sad that, you know, BIPOC children are going to face the brunt of this because they're the ones who are in schools that don't have access to any of these things, you know. And our school district, I don't know what they're doing right now, and they're giving administrators raises and things like that, but there's, like I said, homeless kids in our school district. There's thousands of kids who still don't have laptops and who still don't have internet or hotspots or anything like that. You know, there's kids going and sitting at 7-Eleven, sitting outside trying to do their schoolwork.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like nobody's advocating for those kids and fighting for them. It's just something that's kind of just been brushed under a rug. And here we are almost at a year of virtual school, and kids still are getting, you know, good teachers are dropping off packets to these kids,
Yeah.
you know, once a week. But who's teaching the kids the material? If they're missing virtual class, who's
Right.
teaching them? If their parents are at work, or maybe their parents might not be able to teach them. You know, not everybody was a good student and is able to kind of teach their kids arithmetic or spelling or different things like that. And they rely on teachers. And we're going to lose, you know, a whole year of education, and Black and brown kids are going to be behind because next year parents are going to be getting their kids tutors and getting their kids all kind of little private stuff so that they can catch up and they can make sure that they're together. Poor kids aren't going to have that. They're not going to have that opportunity to do any of that. They're just going to be left behind.
Right. I just have to bring up one other thing, talking about school.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that, and my daughter hated that, she hated and loved that she was homeschooled. Basically, North Pocono, her senior year was her first year ever in a public school. So they were either homeschooled or either went to Christian school, really, they're you know. But one of the reasons why is because there is a, Black boys, there was a study done in schools in the fourth and fifth, well, the third and fourth grade, they loved school. Love school. We're doing amazing. By the time they got to the seventh grade, they hated school and they couldn't even spell cat. So what happened? So when they were in schools, I basically lived at the school. I was petrified when my son and daughter were in public school. I never trusted public school for Black kids. I never did. And my daughter knows that. I was petrified. So I found as a parent, as long as you were there and you contacted the teacher constantly, you went to every teacher parent conference meeting, you called them, you talked to them, they cared for your kids. But if you did not, they didn't really, excuse my language, give a shit about your kids. And I'm not saying all teachers, but I kind of found that in a way was across the board, because there were some experiences in Northeast Pennsylvania, well, I guess Harrisburg area, where a good
Central PA.
Huh?
I said Central PA.
Okay. A friend of mine, and she was a military, she was a major before I became a major, but we knew each other through the military. And her son changed suddenly, started peeing in the bed. I mean, and I think this was like in the either 6th or 7th grade. He just changed drastically. And she was basically a director at Carlisle Barracks. So she worked a full-time job. Dropped into the school one day, her son was being locked in the closet.
Wow.
Okay. He was being locked in the closet at school. Don't ask me how they could get away with this, but this was what was being done to her son. And that was why he changed drastically. So I felt nobody could teach my kids is the way I could. I mean, and And partly, I think the reason they read so much now and everything is because we really took education seriously. I really, really did. Because I know if you don't have a good education in America, and especially if you can't write, writing is paramount. It is paramount. Through my life, I just want to just tell you a quick military story. I had some of the worst commanders in the world. I don't know where they came from, but they were terrible. I could name my great commanders in my military career on one hand. But what I found I had to do was I kept a green notebook and I documented date, time of every single event that happened to me, because I had some really catastrophic events happen to me in my military career. That was one of the reasons I became an officer, because I figured I needed to stand in the gap and save some people, because I saw it was a double standard, because people are human. Even in the military, it was a double standard of the way that Black soldiers were treated and other soldiers were treated. So I knew the regulations backwards and forwards, and I really basically put myself between them and whatever they were going to do, disciplinary action they were going to do to them. But one of the things that was so important is writing. Being able to write and write cohesively is just so important. And so when our kids are not in good schools where they can't spell cat or dog and they can't even write, it's bad. It's bad. Their path forward is going to be in trouble, because writing has saved me so many times along the way. They used to have a joke of, because I filed so many IG complaints. One of my commanders, and he was a real dick, and I have to say that. Sorry.
You want to say his name on not national TV? Here we are. No, I'm just kidding.
So many IG complaints. He had this little desk in his office, and the joke was that was the IG's desk, okay? The Inspector General. But I tell you, they left me alone because I covered for myself along my career. But I found out if I wasn't an officer, I couldn't have got away with half the stuff I got away with. But that was one of the reasons I became an officer.
Yeah.
But writing is paramount. It really, really is. So I would say with our kids' education, parents, you got to be there. You've got to be in their lives. I know if you work and stuff, it's hard. Call the teacher. Go to those parent-teacher conferences. Because if you're not there, they figure you don't care about your kids. And it's so many kids in the class. I don't have time to care about all of them, but I do care about the ones whose parents care about their education. And I just found that out.
So I agree with you in that sense, but I also want to put this other side of it.
Oh, certainly.
It shouldn't be that the parents have to call for the teacher to care about their kid. I mean, a teacher should care. If a teacher's teaching, they should care about the kids. So I almost feel like it's almost like you put the blame on the girl for getting raped. You shouldn't address that way.
Exactly.
Well, if a parent has to call to advocate for their kid to be cared about, there's something wrong with the system. That is a systemic issue.
I agree.
So I don't want to say what you just said was not okay, but I just want to say it shouldn't all be on the parents to call and say, "Hey, I really do care about my kids, so now you should care about my kids." I mean, that's just, for me as a 30 plus year teacher, I would be appalled if I ever felt that my families felt that way, that they had to call to get care. But so we're actually wrapping up. We're coming down to the last few minutes. I went by so fast. But I would love to just ask you, and if there's anybody that wants to put comments in the chat, anybody watching, our attendees have been really great, kind of giving you guys some love. And I don't know if you saw their comments, but as we move forward, and we have the first Black vice president, female Black vice president, I know that we all have a lot of emotions coming up with inauguration, safety concerns, fears, but also excitement and hope.
Hold on, I'll be right back 1 second. And
Yeah,
there's
sure.
a child.
A child. But I would love to know, where is your hope right now? What do you want people to be doing so that your hope can come true? And I'm not saying this in the point of please educate white people, but just where's your heart right now? What's going on for you?
Well, first with Kamala Harris, I'm an AKA Alpha Kappa Alpha, and so is she. So she's my Sora. So I love her. And she's from California as well. It's so much that this administration has to do that it's crazy. I mean, it is so many different things on so many different levels. Get kids out of cages, put those kids back with their parents, find those children, rescind all the goofy, executive orders that this man did that are catastrophic to people's lives. I have hope. Joe Biden is a good man. He has a good heart. Him and his wife, they love the military. The military is my heart. We're military family. He loves the military. He loves people. I believe this is an administration. He's putting good people in place. He's putting people that know what in the heck they're doing in place. So I have hope for it. I have hope for America. It's going to be a difficult task because it's our reputation around the world is crazy, and the last few weeks have made it even worse. But we have to just persevere. That's all we can do. Thank goodness that other person is leaving.
And when you say you have hope for America, I don't mean to be a separatist, but does that include your hope for Black people and Black lives? I mean, I know your hope is, but do you see this administration?
Always, let me just say, I have to say this, okay? And because the way that Black people are killed by the police, I believe it's an initiation right to get into white supremacist organizations. And for me, that was confirmed by how many of them were at the Capitol. Okay, that's just a personal feeling I've had for years that I've looked at. So you're going to weed and pluck out those types out of the police department is going to be a deep cleansing, a deep cleansing. Is it going to be done in one administration? No. Is it going to be done in my lifetime? Possibly not, but there is hope. There is hope. Okay, there is hope.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that even just with Kamala Harris being a woman of color, she's gonna focus on things, and she's gonna have, had life experiences that no one else who's been in that position has ever had. So I think that her attention will definitely fall on things that affect people of color just because she's a person of color. So in that sense, I do have a sense of hope that a lot of things that haven't been previously addressed would be addressed. She went to a HBCU. She knows what it's like to go to a school where maybe you're not treated great and well growing up in elementary school and middle school and high school and things like that. She's a mother. I've heard her speak about the Black maternal and Black infant death rate, and I've never really heard anybody on that level before speak about that. And that's something that's very important to me, and that affects women and women of color, especially indigenous women of color have an insane death rate and maternal health and things like that. So I definitely just feel a sense of hope because I think she will look at things that have normally been overlooked by other people, and I don't think necessarily in on purpose, but I think in a sense of it just isn't something that they're familiar with, and it's not something that they've genuinely dealt with in their life. And that's why diversity matters, because just having somebody else in the room who has a different perspective and came from a different economic background is going to have a different voice and perspective on things than I think other people do. So I'm definitely really excited about that and excited to kind of see what will happen and how that's kind of going to play out. And I feel like a lot of people like Joe Biden and a lot of people admire him regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. And I think the fact that he's going to just be like a normal person and there's not going to be a tragedy every week, I think that's going to give people a sense of comfort and definitely a sense of peace and a sense of hope. And one of you said it where like we almost have to like do this thing to go back 4 years to where we started before to then kind of move forward. And I really think he was a good person to kind of do that, to be very moderate and very in the middle on things, because I think that most Americans really genuinely fall somewhere in the middle. You know, I think that most people aren't extremists on either side, but I think that people just get really caught up in what side of the aisle you're on. And I think that Joe is somebody that everybody kind of seems to like. So I think that if he says it, it will be taken different than like, you know, if we had Pete Buttigieg as president or Bernie Sanders as president, you know, where no matter what they say, if I'm going to, you know, you need air to breathe, it will be divisive. And I think that he is a good person to kind of be in there and be able to, you know, kind of smooth things out. And, you know, as a Black woman, I'm just excited to see somebody who looks like me and, you know, has the same general experiences that I've had and can just be a role model to other kids of color, can look up and say, you know, hey, I can do this too. You know, if I come from this neighborhood and this background, like I could definitely be that. And kids here that are in the Scranton school district that, you know, live in this area, you know, Joe grew up here and he's from this area, and you can say, hey, we have a president from Scranton and I'm from here too. And if he can get out there and kind of do this, then I can do that also.
Mm-hmm. I love that you brought up here's someone in the administration that looks like me, because I'm thinking about your little girl and what an amazing opportunity for her to say, I could be like, I could be her. Like I could do that, to have this image, you know, of accomplishment, success, and that there's somebody representing this little girl. Like that is so beautiful. Just even though Michelle Obama was not the vice president or the president,
Yeah.
she did so much, right? And so it's like continuing this lineage of Black women, powerful, empowering Black women in the White House. I mean, it's just, yeah. And somebody put it in the chats. Jennifer said, "New administration, completely diverse. Hooray!"
Yeah, they really do have a lot of diversity, and you know, people are gonna see Black people in new roles that they've never seen them in before in an administration. They're gonna see gay people in new roles that they've never seen in administration, trans people, you know, a lot of everybody. And I think it's just gonna show people like, hey, they're regular people and they can, you know, do normal things and have jobs and have positions of power, and also, you know, just shatter every ceiling known to man, and pave the way for kind of the people that are coming up. So I'm really excited to see it. There's so many people that you know, Stacey Abrams, she's amazing. And I'm so glad that there is a woman of color like her. And she represents like so many girls and people who look like her who never ever had that image before, and now they can see somebody and see all the work that she's doing. Like Simone Sanders, you know, she's in the comms team, and people that look like her, and I love that like she has like a fade, and you know, it's just so representative of like so many things that are out there in the world, but that you never ever see in like a political position, in a position of power like that. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. So I want to just let the attendees know, and also, of course, Brenda and Amber, I put two links into the chat. These are resources. One that Jodi and I and some others put together. It's the second link that's it's called Resources for Becoming Learned Allies. The first link is scaffolding resources that was created by other people that I got and I'm passing on. But there's books, there's Black-owned businesses, there's documentaries, there are charities, there are films. There's a whole list of ways people can read and become more learned in their journey, our journey here as a community. And I wanted to just really thank both of you so much for trusting us for this space and coming here and being a team together, and also just sharing your experiences that were really hard to hear, and just being your true selves, and also for all the advocacy that you have been doing to help make this country better for our children and their children. And yeah, I don't know, Jodi, is there something you wanted to add?
I want to thank you both. Very powerful, not only sharing your experiences, but your views and giving your perspectives. And so important regarding what you're saying about Black role models being out there, because you've been suppressed so much that we're seeing that change in our country, and pieces regarding connection, right? And you shouldn't have to go out of your way to connect with the police officer, but it's until as a society we connect with one another that change is going to happen, so that we see each other as humans and not less than. So I just really appreciate both of your views on everything.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Somebody was asking for our Instagram handles. Mine is amber__viola on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook at amber-viola. You could also go to my website, amber-viola.com, and I can put all those things in the chat too. I'm on Twitter, amber-viola on Twitter also.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Whatever you can give me, because then I can also put it, because I'll be, when I'm done with the recording, what I'll do is it'll be in my Facebook page, but then I actually upload it to my YouTube channel. So I'd love to have all that information so people can find you and contribute.
I put my book, The One World Order.
Oh, good.
Oh yeah, that's my book that's going to be coming out.
Woo! Exciting. Very exciting. And then also for anybody else who's paying attention to the video, and Amber and Brenda, if you have other friends who feel like they need to have a voice, there is, I will put the link in the chat for how people can sign up to be panelists. It is, we don't have a lot of money, but we offer a small stipend because we don't want to take your time for granted. But we definitely would love to have any people of color. I believe, I'm not sure yet. I think we have February guests already in line, but we do this the third Sunday of every month. This is the link to schedule if you'd like to be a panelist. We take up to 5 people just so that we can keep the conversation not so chaotic, because we want to make sure people get to have time to speak. But super excited to have had you here tonight. I'm going to stop the recording so we can all say goodbye officially to the people watching. And then I will